And now, bringing our very first Data Bites to an end, we're going to hear from Sophie and John from Ofgem.
Hi, I'm Sophie Adams. I'm a product owner, and this is John Downing, a data scientist. We're both in the data services team within Ofgem. So I'm going to give you a very whistle-stop tour of the work that we're actually doing. So welcome to our first slide. So we have been working on our technology, our infrastructure, as part of our really holistic picture of how we deal with data within the organisation, how we deal with energy data. So we've been building our data exchange and data hub. So we're looking at our end-to-end consumer, end-to-end journey, our user experience. So how we get data into the organisation, how we get it out of the organisation, and how we're dealing with it in our data hub. So cleaning it up, transforming it, what stats can we better utilise, not just for us, but across the industry. And we're doing this with a number of stakeholders, so we are engaging across different sectors as well, so not just for data providers, it's network operators, we're looking at across the water sectors, the whole shebang. And it's all well and good, we've got our infrastructure, we're working with externals, but actually what about the data governance? What about the policy, security? How are we engaging across the marketplace? So you've got the top right here, and we're starting to explore where are some commonalities across different utility sectors. So to give you a bit of an overview of the actual data that we're dealing with, I'm going to hand over to John.
Okay, so yeah, we don't really have time to go into kind of all the data that we're using, but we'd like to kind of talk to you about the technology that we're building. So this project was started 2 years ago, and we've got the data hub now established, and the data exchange is just about to go into private beta. And these are kind of two key components that I think a lot of organizations have or need, and Ofgem is actually, able to kind of share some of this technology and also share the process by which this transformation has happened. So we started 2 years ago really looking at data quality and have kind of moved on to changing the security landscape for information in Ofgem and the energy sector, digital transformation and organizational transformation in Ofgem as well, and now kind of starting to push industry to exchange data better, and Ofgem's in this unique place where they're sitting in the heart of the energy sector and everyone's giving them data. So how did we kind of start and go about doing this? Well, we've set up a process which is kind of along some of Paul's lines of thinking around a process for delivery, and we've split things out into kind of these 5 steps where it's not just about building a data pipeline, it's actually about defining, exploring and understanding the user needs and who needs this data and what's the output from the data. So I won't go through each one of these, and we could talk about that later. I think I'll be short of time. And with this process, we're also kind of trying to create a full picture of different people who work on these digital projects. So right from user research all the way through to kind of data engineering and data QA. And the GDS manual doesn't really talk so much about data, so a lot of these things we've had to kind of test and learn and iterate on ourselves, and then kind of through to data science at the end. One thing I'd just like to highlight that's worked quite well for us is splitting the role of a business analyst into someone who is a true business analyst and cares about business outcomes, and someone who's more of a kind of data savvy business analyst who looks much more specifically at technology and process. And so we kind of have had the business analyst guys doing the define and then explore and really digging into the data. And a data business analyst is different from a data scientist in our view as well. So data science probably someone who does much more complex mathematical modeling. We'll skip back to this slide. And then lastly, in terms of kind of going around organizational transformation, this is where we started 2 years ago. And this is kind of our data architecture. So we go through a series of steps to kind of enrich data right the way through collecting it from someone, a data supplier, to publishing it. And you can't just jump straight from having nothing to suddenly having a data platform and a data exchange. So we've gone through the step of, having some data management in the data hub, And still kind of keeping Excel, everyone loves Excel, it's very, very good. And then lastly, so we're kind of halfway here at the moment. So we're using these tools, Zeppelin, BI tool, ClickSense. We're still letting people do Excel, and then starting to add in these tools, machine learning in Python and PySpark. The Data Hub itself is a Hadoop platform, and the Data Exchange is a kind of Java application which pipes data into the Data Hub. So I'd say we're kind of halfway between here and here at the moment. And there's a lot of organizational learning that needs to happen. Right.
So if we going back to the user needs, we've not done this in isolation. So we've done gone out to hundreds of different bodies. So consumer insights, so looking at network operators, suppliers, other government departments, and we've helpfully, I put some emojis on this. This is one of the better ones, and you can even still, there's some really angry faces here, even when it comes to data collection, manipulation. There's teams set up with data providers that are just to send data to government bodies. So there's a lot of work to be done in there. To start completing the user journey, what we've done is, well, John has run through actually that middle section of how we deal with the data, but actually we're developing a data exchange. All of this is actually designed to be portable, reusable, so it's open source coding. We plan to plant it into other regulators with a tiny bit of rework. It's reusable, it's open. So it's role-based access, so you can log in. So a supplier could log in, submit data, it's auditable, it's traceable, it will then land into our hub. You'll get confirmation back of has it landed, has it been rejected, and then in the longer term, actually, how do you bring insights back through this, and how do you start to share not just the data, but the methodology? Is it open? Is the entire pipeline accessible? And to round it off, the insights that we're actually looking at, so we're using Zeppelin here. This is domestic tariff data. So this is how much you are paying for your energy. This applies to everyone in this room. So actually, this is daily data. This took weeks to just get this time series done. If you were doing it in Excel, it's huge. It's a gigabyte of data a week, and it trips over very quickly. But actually, we can ingest large volumes of data. It's complex. We can do a huge amount of manipulation, cleaning up, and it gives us so much more insight. And going into ClickSense, which we're also using, we've got some pretty charts. You can start to join data sets. You can start to pull in data from all different organizations. You can start to manipulate it in a way that we've just never had that capability before. And again, it's not just for the energy sector. What we're looking at is how can we bring in water data? How can we bring in telecoms? Say, for example, you've got another beast from the east, storm, coming over. Is it affecting water supply? Is it affecting your electricity? Are there problems with the gas mains? But actually, is the problem there that you've got a roadblock so no one can get to it, and you've got a pocket there that are having issues? You can suddenly see those spikes in issues, but just having that capability to draw all of that information together. So I think to take away is that we really want to share our learnings. If you want to come and throw data at us, please do. But it's taken a huge amount of new skills to do this. This is not just throwing policy analysts or more economists at this. These are the skills that we've been recruiting. So it's your data scientists, it's your data business analysts, it's the whole package. Thank you.
Any questions?
Hi, Matt from the Centre for Ageing Better. In energy, you've got things like centrifugal hive monitoring non-energy stuff, things like whether someone is running too many taps or heating, and that is going to feed into the health sector. Things like, is that person unwell? Does that person need care? How do you reconcile safeguarding that person's privacy, their data security, with big open source data sets like that?
Hi, Martin Pilkington from IHE Global. Do you do predictive work? So in other words, you can see the mix of renewable and non-renewable energy sources and prices, and you actually are able to look forward and see what the volume is like, where the gap is, and what the price of energy is likely to be in the future?
So on the first question, so it's about vulnerability and how you're taking in consumer data. We're not quite there with all that thinking because we just haven't got into ingesting all of that data. But we're looking at the governance around it. So actually, it might be useful to tap into some aggregated information. But what we're working with across industry, and we're particularly with the Energy Task Force at the moment, is actually what are the principles governing that? we might not necessarily need to see all of that data on a large scale as a regulator. Why do we need to know that? We need to make sure that industry are making sure that's open. So even if you manage to see in the energy industry they're struggling, or if there's a disability there, can you join that information across? And it's also how, when you've got data sharing of that, you don't penalise someone across industries as well. You've got to be very careful with, if they're sharing data, it's like for the good of the consumer, but if they're sharing it in one area, so especially over government as well, when we start to join all of these data sets, we've got to be very mindful that they might be a vulnerable person, so, or they might need a little assistance, so how do we go about it in the right way? So it's on our roadmap, but we just haven't got there yet.
I'd add as well that kind of that level of granularity, so tracking whether someone's got their tap on, you could do it with a smart meter, but Ofgem isn't taking smart meter data just yet. So, and then always that it's the data creators, it's it's your data, it's not necessarily Ofgem's data just to take from you. So you should have that control of who gets your data. And then predictive modeling, in short, yes. Ofgem does do predictive modeling. We do not do it yet in the platform, so there are some teams outside of the platform, but we'd hope that we could take everything into the platform and do it at a much greater scale or speed.
Any more questions? Oh, sorry, yes.
Hi, I'm interested in the 7 data sharing powers that are in the Digital Economy Act of last year. Certain of them relate to sharing data between regulators such as yourself and other parts of government. I'm just wondering if you've started using that power at all.
No, I'll have to come back to you on that, unfortunately.
I'm the same.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes, Emily again.
Hi. So I'm interested in the users, the end users of your data, and what you spit out rather than the users who are giving stuff to you. And I'm just interested in where you are in thinking about Excel as the way in which you kind of get the data out into the world. And I'm just saying that as someone who is a user of data who is not particularly technical. So if something doesn't come in Excel, I kind of can't use it. Yes. And I'd just be interested to know, is that something that you found in your kind of user research, or are you finding people who actually want something in like Tableau, for example, that Ofsted does, which is like, why? So, yeah.
So at the moment, I'll pass over to John and his love of Excel. So internally, we're working towards creating better insights using some of these tools and getting data into a machine-readable format, whether that's CSV format. Yeah. And what we're looking at is that how much data can we actually start to get out into the big wide world, sort of whether it is our minimum viable product is CSV, and sort of see what else we want. I don't know if you...
Yeah, I think that you're not looking for data, you're looking for insights. So the end goal would be for Ofgem to open up some of their portals and say, hey, come look at this dashboard, click the things you want, and maybe if you really want the data, take the Excel as well.
Do you want the data?
Okay, so, and I think that would always be open in the same way ONS shares data too. But I think the end goal is really for them to host a lot of data in a common platform and then give the right people the right interfaces. And that might be, energy regulators checking the way that regulation is done, or the way that regulation is created by Ofgem, and doing some quality assurance on that regulation in a platform with Python or in Excel or however they like to play.
I think all of this as well, you've got everyone loving having a data hub and more insight and a visualization tool on top of that. But it's again, still that middle step. It's then how do you bring all of that together? And yes, Excel is the favorite tool. Everyone, even for our internal users, it's just what people are used to as well. So I think your next steps are looking at some of the bigger pictures. How do you start to get all of these to interact? What is the next step with that? And that's just not quite there with all that thinking yet.
So Excel makes the world go round. A final set of questions. We've got a gentleman here. Any others? We'll take a final one if anyone's got one. Okay, we'll go with those two.
Hello, I'm Tom Dolan. I'm also a product manager. I was interested in your splitting of the two BA roles, and I was wondering if that had been in any way effective at helping people understand what all of this stuff can actually do for them, which I think is still the big gap we're trying to get across.
Yes.
There's lots of cool things, but does anybody want them?
Jeremy Fisher from Ofgem, a plant. How do you measure your return on investment, which is kind of related to the previous gentleman's question?
I'll take the splitting of the roles. I think talking to people in different levels helps them understand what the outcome is. And often, the BA, in terms of the high level, he or she can talk and say, well, this is the outcome of the business, and people understand that. And then at the next level down, I think sometimes people are quite lost. And having someone who's got the capability to empathize and talk around that, they don't necessarily have to be super technical, they're more kind of outward facing to the business. And so having two people who talk at different levels, I think helps, and then you know who to ask the right questions to. But if our teams were a lot smaller, it would just be one person, I think. It's just the fact that we have quite a large team, we can specialize.
And on how we measure success and sort of our value. So it can be quite difficult to get a really tangible result from all of this, and what we've been looking at is what our selling point is. So, I mean, it's where we can look at where we've actually invested within projects within the organisation, how much have we actually started saving. I mean, there's a colossal amount of time. I mean, in some of the teams, there's 80% on just trying to find the data and manipulate it and clean it up. However, all of this automates that entire process. It removes the entire human interaction from when we get the data in to the end result, sort of spitting out into the BI tool. It allows people to spend all of their time gaining insight. So we measure our success of like how many users are we onboarding, how many data sets are we getting through. Not only that, we've saved a couple of million already in the last 6 months from stopping people going out to other consultancies to do the same work that we could have run through the platform and that we have run through the platform, and just actually creating that better insight. And those are some really huge wins. Those are our selling points. And this is what I'm trying to drive across, is that actually, can we get data from other sectors? Can we actually show use cases where we can mash data together and just say, actually, we can do better for the consumer? Or where can we add value? Or what can we stop doing, more importantly?
Thank you very much.